Welcome to the Fulfillment Project podcast, where we, the seekers, unite together to step into our higher selves and highest purpose. I'm your host, Simpli Sara, and I'm glad that we have found each other here today. My aim for this show is to give you some tools and strategies, along with the awareness of emotional intelligence and intuition, as you create a life and business from alignment, creating more joy and fulfillment every single day. Hello, friend. Welcome to today's episode on the Fulfillment Project podcast. I am your host, Sara, and I have been doing so much reflecting over definitely the past couple days. I'm just coming off of my second Simply Aligned event, and my book has also just released, and I feel like there has been a moment of celebration from all the work that I have been putting forth into my brand this year, along with all the work that I've done on myself for the past 2 or 3 years in order to make this pivot and shift into the direction that I'm in now, and all the content that is here on the podcast and how I show up and serve women now. And I thought it would be a really good idea to host a show or an episode here talking about the 5 spiritual lessons that I've learned through the pivoting and the shifting that I have done. This is my third time pivoting. I'm going to say second major time. I pivoted my fitness business into a holistic fitness business. So it wasn't like a huge niche shift. It wasn't an entire brand and message shift. It was more just like a little bit of a step to the side. And then in 2017, I put my fitness and holistic business aside and went into business coaching with my fiance, Joe, which was a huge pivot. And then this year is another huge pivot out of business coaching into helping women with their alignment, helping women get unstuck, helping women shed false identities or layers that are not themselves, helping them regulate their nervous system, helping them transition or pivot themselves in whatever that might look like to them. And I am just so lit up by this work. But it's been a very challenging year for me. This year, I would say, is the biggest growth year I've had in a long, long time. And, maybe you've been listening to the show for a while, or you've followed me on Instagram, or maybe you're on my email list. And from that outside perspective, where maybe you're only just seeing marketing content, it can look like things just happen with ease from people. It can look like things are easy. It can look like things just, happen. And we sometimes don't see behind the scenes of all the stuff that's going on in order for someone to have a pivot or a transition. And so I believe this episode will serve you here today if you feel like you are in a transitionary period, or maybe you're looking to pivot something. That could be a career, that could be a business, that could be a relationship, anything where you want to do something new or take something new on or step up in a different way than you have before. It requires some work, some inner growth within ourselves in order to have the, I'll say, confidence and groundedness in order to make that shift. Because every time we want to step up and do something new or transition or a pivot, it requires us coming out of our comfort zone. It requires us taking different actions. It requires us having different thoughts. It's going to spark different emotions. And ultimately, sometimes this can make people either stop and stay where they are or retreat back to what is comfortable, as opposed to learning how to move through those uncomfortable emotions. I run a program called the Aligned Sisterhood, and it's like a mastermind style program to help women in a very anti hustle approach in order to step up and do different things in the world or transition or pivot their business. And one of the things I talk about from the very beginning of working with them is about the different stages of growth. And so our first stage is our comfort zone, which is our familiar world. There's known patterns. It's very predictable, which is why it's called the comfort zone. And there's nothing wrong with this phase. It's good to be in phases of your life where there's very much like solid ground. You know what to expect. Things come with ease, and we can go on a little bit of an autopilot. But if we stay in our comfort zone too long, and if we are growth focused beings, and you just listening to this show, I know that you are, it's life is going to feel a little bit stagnant. or uninterested, or we're going to feel this yearning for something more. And that next stage is the fear zone. And so every time we come out of our comfort zone, we go into something new, different actions, different environments, something new that's going to bring up this fear based ego mind where we just want to stay where we are. The ego is like, oh, I don't know what this is like. I can't predict this. I don't know what's going to happen. And all these thoughts go running through our mind. But if we understand that there is this fear zone, and on the other side of the fear zone, that next stage is the learning zone where we are gaining new skills, we're trying new things, we're in the midst of learning this new area that we're moving into, then that fear begins to dissipate. And the next stage after that learning phase is our growth stage. This is where we feel an expansion. There is so much excitement. We're watching ourselves be different people, doing different things, having different things, and it's a very exciting place to live. And it's not like we're ever always just in one area. If we are these growth focused beings who want to achieve awesome things and live a life of deep meaning and value, we're going to constantly be flexing through these different stages all the time. And so, if you're someone who's in a new transitionary period, or you're wanting to do something new, or you're craving a pivot or something new, just understand that there are these phases. And I saw myself go through each of them this year. And I'm going to talk about them as we go through these 5 lessons. And so, in December of last year, I told my fiance that I wanted a personal brand again, that I wanted my own brand and I wanted to help women. And I had this vision for myself. And so at the beginning of this year, all of that started. And my lesson number one to give you is that you don't need to have it all figured out. This is valuable for anything. You don't need to see the bigger picture. You don't need to see what that necessarily the end result is. As long as there is a desire and a yearning, that's all that we need. It's kind of like if you've ever planned a trip before and you have to plug in a destination. Let's say I live in Toronto. Let's say that I want to drive down to Florida. I would put Florida in my GPS and the GPS would guide me. And getting in my car and driving, just because I can't see Florida doesn't mean that I can't trust the road from that vision that I already see right in front of me. And so, whenever we're looking to transition, all you need to see is just what's in front of you. Really, that's it. And then be taking the next step and the next step. And when we think that we need to see everything or have it all figured out, this is when we end up feeling blocked and we'll feel stuck and we'll get into that fear based mind. But if we can learn to be in a learning zone all the time of like, hey, I can figure this out. I trust in my ability to figure this out. I don't need to see everything. I don't need to have it all figured out. Heck, I don't even need to know what I'm doing sometimes, as long as I feel like I'm moving into the right direction. And that was a huge thing for me of knowing I wanted to shift. But even though I had this sense of yearning, I didn't know what the brand was going to be about. I didn't know what the message was. I didn't know exactly how I wanted to help women or what that program or coaching would look like. I just know that I needed a shift. And sometimes that has to just be enough and to honor that phase. And what you need to do here is it's putting that ego aside and being able to get vulnerable with yourself and even those around you of like, this is a direction I'm moving towards and I don't have it all figured out. And hey, I don't really know what I'm doing right now, but I'm feeling this call and I'm feeling this pull forward. And that's all that I need right now. And that even came up with a conversation with Joe. He's like, well, what's this going to look like? And, what's the program and what are you going to offer? And, basically like, how are you going to make money in this business for us? And I was just like, I don't know, but I need the space to be able to figure that out. And so you don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to see the bigger total vision. You just need to know that you are yearning for something more. And that can just be enough for right now. What that's going to do is it's going to give you a bit of peace and it's going to give you a bit of ease with the direction that you're moving towards, which can help us move forward better when we have that regulated nervous system and we're not in that fight or flight or fear based thought patterns. My lesson number two, which ties into lesson number one, is take messy, aligned action. And so we don't need to have it all figured out, but when those hits of inspiration come, And when those really good feeling actions come or ideas come up and that feel like they're pulling us forward, then we should take action and don't be afraid for it to be messy. And so at the beginning of this year, I didn't know I was going to be hosting an event called Simply Aligned. I didn't know I was going to be hosting a plant medicine retreat called The Upgrade. I didn't know that I was going to be creating the Aligned Sisterhood. I didn't know that I was even going to be starting the podcast up. I stepped away from it for over a year. I didn't know any of that. But as soon as I gave myself the space to know I was going to move into a different direction and that I didn't have it all figured out and I was okay with that, I created space to allow aligned action to come in. And so aligned action is action that feels really good. It's action that comes from inspiration. It's action that gets you excited where you can't help but not take action. It's not action that feels draining. It's not action that's going to fatigue you. It's not action where you feel like you have to do it or it's a burden or you just want a relief from it or you're doing it because it's a means to an end. Aligned action feels like you can't help but not take that action. And so you are pulled. You're not pushed into action, you're pulled forward into that action. And that's what I did. I stepped back and the first download that came to me was the vibe quiz, which I created in January. It's not up right now. I ended up taking that down because there's some changes I want to make to it before I set it live again. So I created an opt-in offer, a way to gain email addresses, a way for anybody who's interested in the direction I was moving towards to be able to come deeper into that work. Then the download came for my upgrade retreat, hosted that. Then the download came from, well, my book came before the retreat. Then the download came to host my Simply Aligned event. And then through the fall, I was like, okay, I'm going to kind of rinse and repeat things. My book is coming out. I'm going to host my event again. I launched my Aligned Sisterhood and I allowed it all just to unfold as it was coming at me. And I say this ties back into number one because we don't need to have it all figured out. And when we think we have it all figured out, we're not creating the space for those beautiful miracles to show up into our lives, those beautiful hits of inspiration that might be leading us into a better direction. And so messy aligned action is going to feel good, but sometimes you don't know how it's going to connect to the bigger picture. And especially those of you who are business owners and have had a full blown running business where all the pieces are there, right? Like you might have multiple offers and you're showing up on Instagram and maybe you have a podcast or a YouTube channel, you're running an email list, like you have an onboarding system, a sales process, like the machine is built when you're running like a full-time business. And then when you want to start over, you don't need to have all those pieces in place. And in fact, if you think that you need to plug all those pieces at once, you're not creating space to allow those inspirations to come in for you to take those aligned actions. And so this year, I felt like I was flying by the seat of my pants, but I was okay with that because I gave myself the space to be able to do that and lean in to whatever felt right because I made a promise to myself at the beginning with someone who wants to teach aligned manifestation that I was not going to create anything unless it felt really good. I was not going to create something just because maybe I thought that it was going to make me money or because I thought that the market wanted it or someone said it'd be cool if we had this or I saw like a need. It had to come from me and it had to be something that I wanted to show up in. And this is what aligned action is. It's something that will serve, it actually serves you before it serves other people. Because when you're creating something that serves you most, your best, most highest self shows up for the thing to be able to serve, which ultimately gives forward, it gives back. And so everything I've created this year has first and foremost been for me because I know when I create containers that I want to show up in, or I create things that light me the F up that I can't help but not talk about or help move forward with action, I know it will serve people on that level as well. Lesson number 3 is strengthening your faith. So when we don't have it all figured out, and when we commit to taking messy aligned action, we have to have faith that it's going to work out. Because when we can't see the full road or we can't see the full picture, and maybe our ego fear-based mind is kicking in like, oh, what's happening here? What am I doing? What's the outcome gonna be? How is this going to end up? I need to see, I need to see, I need to know, I need to know. we need to activate our faith. And what that means to you is going to be individual. And so for myself, it was activating trust within myself of like, I know how to build a business. I've restarted twice before. I can restart again. So faith and trust in myself and my own abilities, faith and trust in the inspiration and downloads to come, faith and trust that when I got those inspirations and downloads that I would be pulled into action through aligned action, and also faith that everything always has a way of working out. There's a whole section in my book called Keeping the Faith. It's in chapter 9, which is the last chapter, because we all crave certainty in our life. That's what the ego wants. It wants certainty. It wants predictability. But if we always knew what was going to happen, it would take the magic out of life. You would never engage in conversations if you knew what that person was going to say. If you knew exactly what was going to happen next week, would you even have like a drive to get out of bed? Would you have inspiration to want to create something to know, oh my goodness, what's going to come of this? Like, what magic can I create from this? And so, having uncertainty and unpredictable situations actually creates a very exceptional and exciting life. And the one thing that is certain in life is that nothing is uncertain. I'm sure you have been sideswiped by situations that maybe felt out of your control that weren't really great and you didn't have a good time in them. And I'm sure you've also been sideswiped by things that have surprised and delighted you. That's part of the human condition. And so, whenever we are transitioning or stepping up or doing something new or feeling pulled into a different direction, we have to keep faith that we're being pulled into that direction for a reason. Which leads me into my fourth lesson, which is an energetic upgrade always requires working on your whole self. And so when we are feeling pulled into a new direction that we don't maybe have full competency in or full confidence in yet, we have to activate a different level of ourselves. And so shamanic philosophy teaches us that we are so much more than just what we can see and touch. And so if you believe that you are so much more than just your physical body, you'll really love this. And I've talked about the whole self before. The whole self encompasses our physicality, so our physical body. It encompasses our mind, which is our mental body. It encompasses our emotionality, which is our emotional self, our emotional body. It encompasses our spiritual or intuitive self. And then it also encompasses our self expression, how we show up in the world by activating our physical, mental, emotional, and intuitive self. And so I've really had to activate that higher energetic frequency of all of my parts. I have doubled down on my physical health more than I ever have. And in fact, deciding to shift and pivot, that was a huge priority to me and getting very clear on my values that my health, my physical and mental health comes before absolutely everything. Because a past version of myself may have skipped the gym or not gone for walks or missed meals or not drank enough water because I've just been so immersed in my work as a recovering workaholic and had a therapist in 2019 label me as a responsible workaholic. These are things that I have needed to have a lot of awareness around and be super mindful on the actions that I'm taking in regards to the projects that I'm moving forward. And so my knowing that I wanted to write a book and knowing that I'm moving into this new space and having some anxiety throughout the year, of course, of like, where is this going? What's happening? Is it working? Are people paying attention? Am I making the right decision? All those things definitely come up and they will come up for you whenever you're moving into a new space. But if you can learn to regulate your nervous system with the physical self, if you can learn to work with your mental self and that chatter that goes on in our minds, the insecurity, the doubts, the limiting beliefs that are most likely going to pop up when something is new, learning to work with our emotionality, learning to stay in a high emotional frequency or be able to sink lower into those deeper, darker emotions and ask, why are they there? What are they trying to tell me? What needs to be expressed? What do I maybe need to unpack to see why that is there or why that is showing up? And when we can do that with the physical, mental, and emotional self, this is when we really unlock our spiritual self, our intuitive self. Because I look at the physical body, the mental body, and the emotional body like a channel to our spiritual and intuitive self. And I look at it like that because I've seen this in myself time and time again. When my physical self is inflamed, I was sick for 5 years, couldn't hear myself, couldn't hear my intuition. So when our physical self is inflamed, when our physical self is burnt out, when our physical self is sick or just unwell, it causes a foggy channel within us. When our mental self is disrupted and dysregulated with cognitive distortions or negative mental chatter or the limiting beliefs that are popping up, it creates a foggy channel. When our emotions are mismanaged or we are feeding into those lower emotions when maybe it's not necessary or we're not learning how to reach for those higher emotions, we create a foggy channel. And when we have a foggy channel, we can't hear ourselves properly because we are governed by the inflammation in our physical body. We're governed by the dysregulation of our mind and all that negative chatter, and we're dysregulated by our emotions. And you're operating from a place of inauthenticity. And that's how I look at someone being inauthentic is there's just a foggy channel with their physical, mental, and emotional self. When you clear all that debris up, we have a clear channel to your true authentic self, which is your highest self, which is connected to your intuition, which is your spiritual self. And when we have that clear channel to the spiritual self, then the fullest, highest expression of yourself can show up. There's wholeness. There's not disharmony or dysregulation with the different parts of our whole self. It's just your authentic energy that's shining through. And so I've really doubled down on that work to ensure that this transition was as smooth and as easeful and as expedited or fast as possible. Because I've also, through my past pivots, it's taken like 2 years for me to step into the confidence of the direction I was going in. This year, I felt it after about 6 months. And I was like, I got it. I'm there. I still don't have it all figured out. Some days I don't know what I'm doing. I maybe don't see the full picture yet, but the confidence is there. The negative self talk is gone. My emotions are highly managed through this. My intuition is wide open. And oh my goodness, the downloads and the guidance that I'm getting for this direction feels so good. And so like this is the work that I do with women now, creating wholeness of ourselves so that we can upgrade our energetic frequency so that we can move through our transitions in life with more ease or step out into the world with a higher expression of yourself in the way that you want to. And my fifth lesson for you today is that the work, the work is never done. As growth focused being, as probably a fellow sister seeker like myself, we want to feel like we are evolving. Humans crave that. We crave evolution. Look at our world. Look at, the scientific, the science community. Like, look at all the areas within our world that are based on evolution. They're based on progress, and we naturally crave progress. We want progress in our relationship. We want to feel progress in our business or our career. If we don't have that, we feel stagnant. And so when we go out to seek more or we seek deeper meaning or fulfillment in our life, it's going to require us to do the work, which is everything that I've talked about here, taking messy aligned action, being okay with not having it all figured out, strengthening that faith in yourself and that everything always has a way of working itself out, and then to constantly be upgrading our the energetics of our whole self so that we can show up as a higher expression to step out with more ease in the things that we're doing. And this is just, it's constant. It's constant. It's not a one and done thing. And that we're just like free of all of our insecurities and free of all of our limiting beliefs. And everything is just like easy and predictable. Because again, life is not exciting or engaging if it is always predictable. It is the unpredictability of life that gives its zest, that gives its true meaning for why we want to show up and why we want to wake up in the morning and have excitement for seeing what unfolds within our day. So I hope this episode has served you here today. No matter where you are on your journey, just know that you're not alone. Like, we're all going through it and we're all going through stuff, whether you see that in someone's life or not. Everyone has their own stuff going on. And I think when we can learn to accept our place within our growth path, that's when things feel just more relaxed and with more ease. And we don't have to feel like a constant anxiety stress ball moving forward with the things that we want to do in life. When we learn to have that faith and when we learn to have acceptance with where we are, and we might not know where we're going, and that's okay. This is when we feel like we have grace, moving with grace through all the seasons and transitions in our life. So, thank you for tuning in, my friend. I am going to do a really quick plug here for my book, Follow the Joy, the book on aligned manifestation, which goes deeper into this. So it's no wonder that I was called to strengthen all of this year through my own pivots and shifts. If you haven't gotten your copy of the book yet, you can go to followthejoybook.com. If you haven't listened to the last episode here on the podcast, I read you the introduction. So if you want to know what it's all about and what you can expect in the book, you can go back to the past episode and listen to that. All right. I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for joining me on this episode today. My website, simplysara.com, is a great place for me to continue to support you on your journey to alignment, joy, and fulfillment. There you will find upcoming retreats that I am hosting, resources, books, and many other helpful tools to help you on your travels through this thing called life.